a rookie organizer would go and ask them, "Hey, could you guys, set up an infant mortality center here in our neighborhood?" That's rookie. Saul, expert. What does he do? He organizes a giant march. He gets everyone in the community together. We're going to go march downtown. We're going to go to the headquarters of Infant Welfare Services. We're going to demand a new infant welfare in our office in our neighborhood, right? And he says, we're not going to let them say one word. We're going to scream and shout. And so he gets a whole march going downtown, and don't let him say one word. We're going to keep the fever pitch going. And he says, right when things reach the climax, Saul steps in, quiets everyone down, talks to the leader of the infant welfare. All right, what is it going to be? You guys going to set up an office for us or not? And the lady goes, yes, of course, we'll set up an office for you. Everyone, woo! Yeah,
Huge
we
win.
got what we wanted. And now we march back home. And man, which, by the way, that's a great strategy, right, Jay? Because he's like,
Yeah.
dude,
Early win.
early win, vibes are high. Now let's go get more of what we want because look at that worked. We can go marching. I'll march next Saturday. Where are we marching, right? Welcome to the Books Brothers podcast, where we synthesize and discuss the best books in the world on history, science, and philosophy.
Every idea that animates our world is best expressed in books, which is our favorite medium. So if you want to understand where we are, where we're going, you've got to read the blueprints. So I'm JD.
I'm Andrew, and today's episode is Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, the subtitle, A Pragmatic Primer for Realistic Radicals.
I like that too. Realistic radicals. He's not a pie in the sky guy.
No.
This is a realistic, nose to the grindstone sort of book. Like, what can you actually accomplish? What can we actually organize people to do? And how do we do it?
I'm excited for this one today. This one came about because I'm just curious from the perspective of a politician, how do the mechanics of politics look from their perspective? What are they thinking about? What is the strategy if you're a politician? How do you get more power and influence to create more change how you want to make the change? And so that question's on my mind, and I look out in the world and I see, wow, there's this book that claims that both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, this was their strategy for gaining power. And I said, wow, I should probably read that book. And this is the book, Rules for Radicals. So now, JD, you did a little research on the Barack Obama claim. Do you want to just cover that quick?
Well, the reason I covered it is because you assumed that Barack Obama publicly stated that this was his influential book. And he comes out of Chicago, and he comes out of an organization that Saul Alinsky actually created. So obviously was very influenced by this book, but for reasons that you'll see, never publicly announces it, kind of distances himself. And then Hillary Clinton, this was her thesis in college, was written about rules for radicals and stuff. And she was, maybe equally praising and, arguing against his philosophy and everything. But it doesn't help when you want to run for a national election later to be super tied to this guy. So who does he quote here at the beginning of the book that would have gotten Hillary in so much trouble?
Well,
Why don't you just read the quote?
Dude, I just want to tell you what kind of author in the intro to the book quotes themselves, which is what he's doing.
Does he really?
This is his own quote. He has the quote, and then he goes, Saul Alinsky is like the tributed. But listen
tracks.
to who he's talking
tracks.
about is crazy. This does track. Quote, lest we forget an at least over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to the very first radical from all our legends, mythology, and history, and who is to know where mythology leaves off and history begins, or which is which. The first radical known to man who rebelled against the establishment and did it so effectively that he at least won his own kingdom, Lucifer. So in the intro to this book, Alinsky credits Lucifer as the original, the OG radical, which is just crazy, dude.
So I actually just listened to an interview with him, and it colored it a little bit because I was listening to, this guy's a super influential figure, even on the right now, where they're studying his tactics and everything, like how Tea Parties, organizers, like how can we, build political power. Then I went back and listened to an actual interview with him from the 60s. Something that sticks with me and kind of, I think, colors this quote is that the right were painting him as kind of a totalitarian, kind of communist adjacent and everything. And actually, Alinsky's own words, which we'll see, we got to take with a grain of salt, but I think you'll see that it kind of makes sense. He doesn't want to build political power for like one party or one organization. He just wants all sorts of organizations, all sorts of communities to exercise more power. And maybe in his kind of secular eyes, God is kind of totalitarian. And then there's one guy, Lucifer, was like, hey, maybe I've got a different system over here that can, and so he like builds his own kingdom. And that's kind of what now we've got like multiple powers battling. So it's maybe he's pulling from Madison's Federalist 10 about how the powers can be set off against each other and thereby creating more liberty for all.
That is a very charitable reading of his Lucifer quote, but I like it, dude. Yeah.
That's about as charitable as you can get to that quote.
Exactly. But this book is interesting, and that's why we're covering it here on Books Brothers. Let's get into it. Chapter 1 is called The Purpose. He's describing why he's writing the book. In the first 5 sentences of the book, he quotes the book of Job, chapter 7, verse 1, quote, "The life of man upon earth is a warfare." In this book, quote, "What follows is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. The Prince was written by Machiavelli for the haves on how to hold power. Rules for Radicals is written for the have-nots on how to take power away." End quote. That's why he's writing.
That's a great framing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really helpful framing because, like, we've talked about the Prince a little bit. It's literally a manual for how to keep power. And this book is a manual for how to distribute power more democratically to different communities to get what they want, especially at this time from like business people and, other political machines and stuff like that.
Great framing. He says in this book, we're concerned with how to create mass organizations to seize power and give it to the people, to realize the democratic dream of equality, justice, peace, cooperation, to give people the chance to live by values that give meaning to their lives. So he does color it with some democratic flowers, some democracy, sparkles on it, Jay. This is sort of the purpose of what he believes his purpose is. So Alinsky, and he makes a great point at the beginning here. He says all significant changes in history have been made by revolutions. So this is a study of the mechanics of revolutions. Quote, "In this book, I present observations, propositions, and concepts of the mechanics of mass movements and the various stages of action and reaction in revolution." I'll tell you guys this. Saul is setting up the book to be really deep and important. Paraphrasing him, starting and fighting for revolutions is the most important thing you can do with your life. I've been doing it my whole life. This is what you should do with your life.
You can see how it's just power. And even that's very Alinsky-ish too, because he is almost amoral. Like he doesn't have any, he's anti-ideology, we should say. Has no ideology, no room, and to his credit too, he's like, I don't know what the problems of this community are going to be in 20 years. An ideology is locked in, things change. I just want communities to have more power. I want communities to organize better. I want to train. This book is really a training manual and something to make himself look really good and say, oh, read my book and check out the first quote. It's a really good author that quotes the first book.
Yeah, dude.
It's full of himself, man.
He's full of himself. This is definitely, I don't even recommend you guys read this book, to be honest. Listen to the podcast is all you need, because the book's not that good. The book reads as an old guy at the end of his career, sit down, you youngins, let me tell you how the world works kind of lecture. And he's like kind of scrambled and he's not very organized. Some of his principles definitely realpolitik, see the world as it is, practical politics. He's got a great quote here.
Dogma is the enemy of human freedom. The human spirit glows from the small light of inner doubt, the inner doubt of whether we are right, while those who believe with complete certainty that they possess the right are dark inside and darken the world outside with pain and injustice. It's not your typical opening quote.
And we're going to drive the points home of this chapter with this true story parable that Saul includes. He's got a lot of parables in here. It's called the Chicago 7.
This is of the time. These are like the 60s and 70s where all the bombings were going off. In 1968, at the Democratic National Convention, a large anti-Vietnam War civil rights protest went off, and a federal grand jury indicted 7 people for conspiracy to incite a riot and stuff like that. So it was kind of like overhanded justice. These guys were like maybe exercising their right to assemble and free speech, maybe, it's kind of an in-between area. So it was right versus left and everything, which obviously Alinsky was on the side of the Chicago 7.
So fast forward to the trial for the Chicago 7. And this is an example of how Alinsky wants you to gain mass movements to gather more power. He goes, okay, the trial protest outside the courtroom is building up steam. There's signs all over the court that say no protesting inside the building. But what happens, Jay? The protest leaks inside the building. And the judge comes out and says, hey, all you protesters inside are our building right now, you're in contempt of court. If you don't leave now, you are all breaking the law. Someone in the crowd shouts, F you, judge. But what happens next? Okay, judge is right. We don't want to have contempt of court. And they all slink out the door and the protest moves outside. Saul hates the slink out. His strategy in that moment, practical politics, real politics, he says, go get arrested. This is the strategic move that gets you so much more leverage in the political battle that we're fighting. Nothing is more powerful than a martyr. He, quote in the book, picketing lawyers threw away a beautiful opportunity to create a nationwide issue. That just is a slice of what kind of tactics you're going to get from this book, which is don't back down, go to jail, become the martyr, go to the extreme, create more drama, create a deeper, harder battle, and that's going to move the needle, the power needle for you.
He breaks down society into three categories.
Yep.
The haves, who have power, the have-nots, and then the have a little want mores. The middle class. And he's like, the have-nots are the greatest in number, the poor people. And he describes them as being chained together by the common misery of poverty. And he says they're thermopolitically, they're the mass of cold ashes of resignation.
He's now going to step into what he would consider a science of revolution, you might call it. And he makes a great point here, Jay. There's not a ton of literature on revolution. He credits Henry David Thoreau. The name of his book was Duty of Civil Disobedience, 1849. He also credits 1861, Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural, quote, whenever the people grow weary of the existing government, they can exercise their constitutional right of amending it or their revolutionary right to dismember it. And Jay, he says, speaking in the language of the 60s and 70s when Saul was here, quote, today, all the literature on the topic of revolutions sucks. Everything revolutionary literature is just communist revolution stuff.
Quote, I hate that the communists have taken over all the revolutionary writing, so much so that when people hear revolution, they automatically think communist.
Quote, us revolutionaries are in a suicidal situation right now, wherein revolution and communism have become one. These pages are dedicated to splitting this political atom. Credit to him. He's like, look, I don't want to have a communist revolution, but I do want to have a revolution. I got to take communist revolution and separate them.
I think he wants kind of mini revolutions. I don't think he's ever talking about overthrowing the government. I think he's about overthrowing little power centers in certain areas and giving more power to the people. I think that's kind of where he's coming from.
Yes, I would agree. A little bit more about his philosophy. In the world as it is, there's no permanent happy or sad endings. The world is a stream of events surging endlessly until death. He's just, political life is full of contradictions. In quote, informal logic, a contradiction is the signal of defeat, but in the evolution of real knowledge, it marks the first step in progress towards a victory, end quote. Every action has a consequence. Actions with good intentions often have bad consequences. The description of any procedure as positive or negative is the mark of a political illiterate. Revolution leads to counter-revolution, then to reformation, and so on in an endless change of connected revolutions and re-revolutions. It's just like, dude, is this not a little bit nihilistic? You know what I mean? It's like,
very nihilistic. Yeah.
Dude, history is a revolutionary relay race, baton of idealism carried by the revolutionary group until they become the establishment and then passed down to the next revolutionary group. This is definitely some old man lecturing on his stoop kind of stuff right here, right? I did like this image. He goes, we're all in a Sisyphean battle, except on our mountain, we always keep going upward. And unlike Sisyphus, the trail is different and newly dramatic adventure each time. So that's kind of a funny, negative but positive look on the world. Jay, he talks about the low road to morality, which I believe what he's trying to say. It was hard to understand a lot of what he's saying. He says that the most practical life is the moral life, and the moral life the only road to true survival. Man must either share part of his material wealth or lose all of it. So he's sort of saying the default choices is that you should be moral, because if you're not, you're just going to die. So it's instead of trying to achieve good morality, it's it's just necessary because otherwise it's not going to work for you. Which is funny after we just nailed 10 quotes about how morals don't mean anything. So I'm confused already, There's no right and wrong. There's only moments to grab power or moments to give away power. That's the entire world is framed in that kind of lens. I want our listeners to think about all the politicians that they see on TV and they see posting on the internet. At least some of them are thinking in this way. So when you get, when you hear the Fox commentators say, well, this and that and this and that, or the CNN, this and that, and it's all just power grabs. They're not actually telling you facts, right? Some of them are, I'm sure, but that's kind of, at least in Saul's framing, what's
the
really
incentives,
happening.
the incentives are not for facts. The incentives are for driving eyes and ears to, feel things and to organize in certain ways. And at least Alinsky's honest about that.
And
which is kind of refreshing.
I would say Alinsky and Machiavelli would kind of agree with at least this chapter 1 stuff so far. And they would agree in this chapter 2 stuff titled Of Ends and Means. And dude, he starts off the chapter, he goes, dude, life is a corrupting process from the first time a child learns to play his mom off his dad to get what he wants. I'm just like, dude, like chill out.
Yeah, he's cold.
Saul. We do get a quote from our boy Gerda. Jay, you want to get this Gerda quote?
Yeah, quote, conscience is the virtue of observers and not of agents of action.
Dude, he's like, if you're actually in the arena, making decisions, doing stuff, you don't get to have a conscience. Only if you're judging the people in an arena, then you can use your conscience to judge them. That's what he's saying. Dude, this brings it home. All-time means and ends banger quote. The means and ends moralists, also known as the non-doers, always wind up on their ends without any means. What a great quote, So
he's saying people that are like, oh, should you do that or should you not do that? He's like, just talk to me about, what means you can use and how to use them. And, don't moralize the means that you're using. Otherwise, you're going to lose the means that you currently have.
Yeah. This chapter, he's got like 27 rules of ethics, which is also just crazy. It's like, dude, what are you saying? But we're going to hit a couple of these ethics rules. Hopefully our politicians don't follow these rules, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do. Quote, one's concerns with ethics varies inversely with one's distance from the scene of the conflict. So basically, closer you are to the conflict, the less you care about your ethics, right? The further away you are, the more judgmental you are about the ethics used. Second rule of ethics, judgment of ethics is dependent upon the political position of those doing the judging. Third rule of ethics, in war, the ends justify any means. Great story. If you want to hit this story with Churchill, Jay, a great story about the ethics here.
So in Winston Churchill, in the late 30s, Hitler just invaded the Soviet Union. Churchill's getting questions from his staff like, how can you, the leading... So Churchill is the anti-communist of all anti-communists, absolutely railing on about Hitler and Stalin. Hitler invades Poland, and Churchill's like, we got to ally with Stalin. And everyone's like, how can you, the leading anti-communist of our country, suggest that we buddy up with the communist Soviets? And Winston says, I have only one purpose, the destruction of Hitler. If Hitler invaded hell, I would make at least a favorable reference to the devil in the House of the Commons.
Dude, all-time banger. Dude, everything that came out of that guy's mouth is an awesome quote.
Yeah, he does have good quotes.
But that's a Hitler. In that moment, Churchill was following the rules of ethics, of ends justify the means. We're partnering with the communists. Fourth rule of ethics, judgment must be made in the context of the times and not other chronological vantage points. Good enough.
The fifth rule of ethics, concern with ethics increases with the number of means available. So like if you have lots of options, then you can be more ethical about them. And I think this one is, as most of this book is sort of about the people in poverty who don't have a lot of means. And so he's like, don't give a shit about ethics. You don't have to worry about that. You've got limited means. Just use the limited means you got.
And I just want to be clear here to all our Books Brothers listeners. We are not saying that we agree with these rules of ethics, but these are what is in the book, right? This is crazy.
This is just the incentive system that's created in democracies. And that's what I find interesting to explore. It's not necessarily good or bad, just like Alinsky's like, I don't know if I'm good or bad. I'm just giving power to the people, is how he thinks about it.
Absolutely. Sixth rule, skip. Eighth rule, skip. Seventh rule, judgment of history leans heavily on the outcome of success or failure. So basically, like, if you win, your ethics were good. If you lose, your ethics were bad.
He says there's no such thing as a successful traitor. Because if you're a successful traitor, you're a founding father.
Morality of your means depends on if you're winning or losing, just in general. Killing in self-defense is always okay. No matter what, your opposition's going to judge you as unethical anyways. Just do whatever you can and, quote, clothe it in moral garments. He does talk about Mahatma Gandhi here. Mahatma, excuse me. Thank you, Jay. According to Alinsky, and I'll give Alinsky credit. He had a bunch of citations and sources, so I'm going to semi-believe this story. He says, dude, Gandhi was only peaceful because he didn't have any guns. And he has a quote from Gandhi saying, they have the guns, so we're going to peacefully protest. And then after Gandhi's party had guns in 1960, the successor to Gandhi, I think his name was Nehru, used the guns on Pakistan. And Alinsky's got a quote here, quote, if Gandhi had the weapons for violent resistance and the people to use them, this means would not have been so unreservedly rejected as the world would like to think.
Hot take.
Hot take. Another Alinsky quote, 8 months after securing independence, the Indian National Congress outlawed passive resistance. So It worked for us, but now we won't let you guys use it anymore now that we're in power.
Pull up the ladder afterwards.
Absolutely. So
he's got this, I mean, just adding, he's got one from Lenin. He was a Lenin fan, and Lenin made a speech about this about his strategy in Russia, saying in effect that right now the government has the guns, and therefore we are for peace and reformation through the ballot. And then once we have the guns, then we get to rule through the bullet and not the ballot.
Another nice
that
little
tracks.
Yeah, it really. Rousseau summed this up in Social Contract, quote, law is a very good thing for men with property and a very bad thing for men without property. Chapter 3, a word about words. And this is a weird chapter. He just kind of like discusses words like conflict, ego, compromise, but we're just going to discuss the word power because it's so often hidden from the view or massaged into nicer terms. Alinsky doesn't like that. He wants to talk about power, Jay.
He says, quote, striving to avoid the force, vigor, and simplicity of the word power, we soon become averse to thinking in vigorous, simple, honest terms.
Call it like it is, team. Don't hide it. Power isn't bad. Power is the ability to do things. When powerful people become corrupt, then power can be used to do bad things. Yes, power can corrupt, but that's not power's fault. It's humans' fault. Pascal, another quote. Justice without power is impotent. Power without justice is tyranny.
Chapter 4, the education of an organizer. The chapter starts off with Alinsky's biggest problem, and he paraphrasing it, man, it's just hard to find good organizing radicals. This chapter, if you were, looking to be an acolyte of Alinsky, would make you feel like shit. He absolutely is just like, nobody's as good as me at organizing.
And by the way, everyone and all the students I ever talk, they all suck at organizing. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
He's like, I've been looking for them everywhere and I can't find them. So I can teach my heart out. Only some people got the skills. He's like, dude, I've taught Catholic priests, Protestant ministers, militant Indians, Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, quote, blacks from all part of the black power spectrum from Panthers to radical philosophers, end quote, campus activists, including the SDS, Students for a Democratic Society. And he's like, 2% were good of all those people.
Yeah.
Tough.
He's not fluffy. Quote,
no, he ain't.
Always we use the student's personal experience. Okay, so he's describing, how he's training these people. Quote, always we use the student's personal experience and dissect events post-mortem. Reality is the only true teacher.
We got these different kinds of micro-organizers I've tried teaching. Some can do particular communities. They can organize particular ethnic groups, but can't do others. Campus activists that could organize students are already rare, but maybe they can organize students. They can't organize lower middle-class workers. Labor union organizers often stink at community organizing because these labor union guys, they just have one big negotiation a year where they go for wage increases, pensions, and vacations. And then once they get their issues settled, they only have grievance meetings until the next contract comes up.
Quote, mass organization is a different animal. It is not housebroken. There are no fixed dates or issues. The situation is fluid and ever shifting.
Saul says, no matter what community you're in, you got to learn the local legends, the anecdotes, the values of that particular community, that particular culture. Now he's going to speak to a 1970s audience, and he talks about this a lot. This is more of his realistic radicals framing, but he goes, in the 1970s, if you guys use words like white racist or fascist pig, your local community is immediately going to stop listening to you. Oh, you're one of those crazy people. Normal communities don't use these words, and as soon as you use them, you've lost all your power in organizing that community.
You're like the Antifa militant, like normal people with kids don't want to, ally themselves with crazy Antifa people, like throwing rocks at police and stuff. He's like, you organize and do more effective things through the community, and you have to adapt yourself to the community that you're in.
And one example of adapting yourself, he's like, I was working with this Mexican-American group in California. I wanted to demonstrate I was part of them. I was with their culture. We were having a typical Mexican-American dinner, rice and beans. And Saul, after the, big dinner, a lot of people, a lot of Mexican-Americans, second bite into dinner, he goes, you guys actually like this shit? And the room, he says, erupted in laughter. They're like, finally a gringo admitted that rice and beans sucks. And he said, because I had a relationship, I cared for them, I could now be authentic to myself. And they really appreciated that. That ingratiated me more with the community, and they're ready to listen to me better. Some of what we're saying about ingratiating yourself with the community, I mean, that's just good leadership. That's like any leadership book will tell you that.
This book was like a cheesy leadership book for sure.
There's definitely some cheesy leadership lines in here. And here he gets to, if you want men to act on any issue, you must polarize the issue to the max. Quote, men will act only when they're convinced their cause is 100% angel aligned and the opposition is 100% devil aligned. Anything less than this creates inaction.
The organizer knows that it's not 100% on both sides, but you can't act like you know it to the people that you're trying to organize, or that you're not going to get anyone to act.
You only act that it's not 100-0-0-100 during the negotiation phase with the other side, when you acknowledge there's really only a 10% difference between our two positions. Public facing, they're devils, we're angels. Internal facing, hey, we're all good. We're just trying to get a good deal for both sides. That's a very political schizoid style. Now we're going to get to chapter 5, communication. And I just have a quick note here, Jay. I'm numbering the chapters. He, as a true radical, does not number his chapters. He just says communication, new section.
Yeah.
So I'm numbering for you all, Books Brothers listeners. Don't worry. I'm wading through the muck to give you guys the real stuff. But Jay, can you just give me an off-the-cuff definition of the word communication?
It's going to be nerdy, but the transmission of information.
Okay, Saul would disagree with you. He would say communication with others takes place only when they understand what you're trying to say. So maybe actually you had a good definition. I do
think that fits a little, but it is kind of, I think, understand, he's meaning too from an emotional and
Yes.
Yeah, like you have to like really level and really get on people's level. You can edit that.
I think he's trying to lecture to a lot of those fascist pig callers who are like, they're not listening to you, bro. So you're not actually communicating,
A lot of theoretical people probably.
Yes.
Don't give the community theoretical answers, give them real world answers.
It doesn't matter what you know if you can't communicate it to people. So if in that event, if you can't communicate it, you're not even a failure. You're just not even existing yet, is what he says. So communication is very important. If you leave after speaking to a group and you say, well, I said a lot of great things, they just weren't listening. That's not the group's fault. That's your fault. You must communicate within the perspective of the people you're speaking with.
Yeah, he describes persuasion as being like a subset of communication where you enter another person's experience and get a fix on their values, their goals, and show how the organizing can accomplish their goals.
Chapter 6, in the beginning. This begins what I would call his sort of more tactical, like instruction manual for how to become an organizer. Step 1, Jay, is establish your identity. Whoever you're organizing, whatever community that you're trying to get to come around to your perspective, they're going to all have thoughts about you and questions. Who's this guy? What's his angle? Who is he really working for? Is he really for us, or is he just using us to get what he wants? And you need to have very clear, acceptable answers why you're organizing this community and answers to those questions we just said.
And once you've answered for your identity, you gain power by becoming dangerous to the opposition. How so?
You're okay. Now, once the community has accepted you because, he's for us, he's on our team, he says the job of the organizer is to maneuver and bait the establishment so that it will publicly attack him as a dangerous enemy. I will say, Jay, this quote, this comment, this like martyr strategy, I see it everywhere now. I mean, you remember during COVID that everyone was being attacked for all the people that were anti-COVID or whatever, and now they're all the leaders of the movement, and in the reverse, it's like the martyrs become the people with power, and it happens everywhere. And our whole mimetic theory journey would agree with this martyr turns into power situation. If you're going to be an organizer, you almost need the opposition to bless you by branding you as dangerous. Now that the people in your community see that the opposition is scared of you, this gives you power in that community. And paraphrasing Saul, he says, once you get that dangerous branding, you've been baptized and now have a birth certificate to operate in this community.
And he's saying that organizers can move around and organizing all sorts of different causes, but he says you have to be invited into the community. That's interesting. He's kind of describing it. Before we thought you were just kind of walking in, but how do you get invited?
Yeah, when the community says who brought you here, because I think he's correct, because he's probably living in the world where when you get to a new community, they already have community leaders. They already have a mayor or a president or a CEO, or I don't know, whatever the group is. There's a leader of the group, right? And so you need to be, hey, who invited you to come help us out? You guys told me to come here, is what he's saying. That your answer must be you guys. So somehow, if you want to organize, you must work your way to get an invitation. And then the very next step, once you get an invitation, you're accepted, is to do everything you can to be branded as dangerous by the opposition. Which, dude, that's a great 1-2 step. It's a crazy 1-2 step, right? Now you're in your community organizing, and you come to realize, wait a second, this community has no idea what they even want. Why are we even organizing? What are we organizing for? Now we have to listen to everyone and summarize a list of what is actually desired. And then Saul says you can't go for too much at once. You need to break it down into tiny little victories so that you can sort of lead people on a crusade with lots of little wins over time. Because even the community is afraid of too much change too quickly. And part of this process of discovering what the community wants and kind of coming into the community is encountering the excuses that the community already has for why this hasn't happened yet. Obviously, you're coming in, you're ready to make change. The leaders of this community are, well, we can't do that. They want to defend their honor. Like, why didn't you do this already?
He talks about an anecdote here of he was organizing Northern Canadian Native tribes. And basically they had rationalizations for why they couldn't organize, because we're all so unique. We all come from different areas and stuff. And we don't want to organize because that's the white man way to do things. We're too far apart. And eventually Saul stopped. He's using his strong communication skills here. He says, these are all just BS rationalizations as to why you haven't organized yet. If you want power, you have to organize.
Dude, they're like, dude, you're the first white man to ever speak to us as equals and told us that it's a bunch of BS.
All the other meat sucks.
Yeah, dude, exactly. He says all the other friendly white men come here. Well, we understand, but maybe you could do this or that, or kind of this more patronizing tone. And they thanked him for just speaking straight and telling them, "You guys are a bunch of BS. Let's go organize." Right?
He's extremely disagreeable.
Yes,
shall we say?
No question.
Yeah. Quote, change comes from power, and power comes from organization. In order to act, people must get together. Is it another quote of himself?
Yes, exactly, dude. Yeah, I mean, just this guy loves quoting himself. And then we mentioned this, get some early wins. So, okay, we're in the community. We've started to figure out what they want. We don't want to just go for the jugular right off the start. Let's get some small wins. He's got another great story organizing what's called the Back of the Yards campaigns in Chicago.
Still around. I looked it up. The Back of the Yards is still operating.
Wow,
so props
amazing.
to him for that.
This was the Chicago slums described by Upton Sinclair in The Jungle. Upton Sinclair, in his book, encouraged, hey, we need to have better regulations around food production and taking care of these people in the Chicago slums who are just doing terrible. So fast forward 50 years further, we're in the same slums and infant mortality has skyrocketed. This Back of the Yards group, they wanted infant welfare support. And they were getting pretty agitated. Why don't we have infant welfare support here? Well, Saul goes and, all right, that's one of the things this community wants. Let's go figure out how we're going to get it. And he discovers the only reason they don't have it is the same Back of the Yards community 15 years earlier kicked out the infant welfare support group for disseminating birth control in the community. So all they have to do to get what they want is ask them, and they'll be right back. A rookie organizer would go and ask them, hey, could you guys, set up an infant mortality center here in our neighborhood? That's rookie. Saul, expert. What does he do? He organizes a giant march. He gets everyone in the community together. We're going to go march downtown. We're going to go to the headquarters of Infant Welfare Services. We're going to demand a new infant welfare in our office, in our neighborhood, right? And he says, we're not going to let them say one word. We're going to scream and shout. And so he gets a whole march going downtown, and don't let him say one word. We're going to keep the fever pitch going. And he says, right when things reach the climax, Saul steps in, quiets everyone down, talks to the leader of the infant welfare. All right, what is it going to be? You guys going to set up an office for us or not? And the lady goes, yes, of course, we'll set up an office for you. Everyone, woo! Yeah,
Huge
we
win.
got what we wanted. And now we march back home. And man, which, by the way, that's a great strategy, right, Jay? Because he's like,
yeah,
dude,
early win.
Early win, vibes are high. Now let's go get more of what we want because look at that worked. We can go marching. I'll march next Saturday. Where are we marching, right? So another good strategic moment for Saul. It's not about
and kind of nihilist.
Yes, exactly. Dude, crazy, right? So another core principle from our boy Saul, quote, organizations need action as an individual needs oxygen. The cessation of action brings death to an organization, you know? But since it's impossible to always maintain constant action on a single issue, organizations require multiple issues to truly be an organization. That's interesting. All right, we handled infant mortality. Let's go handle something else next week. Let's go do this over here. But he's keeping the vibes of this group together, and you know he knows he needs that momentum to keep the organization working. This book, Saul, dude, he's contradicting himself so much in this book. And I told you guys at the beginning of the podcast, I do not recommend that you read this book. It's a scrambled gobbledygook. Our podcast is going to do you just fine. He ends the chapter jumping over to an anecdote about Liberia. In a speech to the United Nations, the Liberian delegate said, quote, "Our nation has been deprived of the benefits of a previous history of colonialism." And they're like, what? And he goes, the press reaction was stunned. You know, what this Liberian delegate was saying was, we've never needed the strength to band together to fight for our freedom. So this leads to political sterility in our country. That's an interesting take, right?
Yeah.
We never had that first march to go demand for infant mortality services. So we never got the momentum to, you know, have strong politics in our country. Very interesting take.
It does. I mean, you know, the Revolutionary War really built, you know, one nation out of 13 in a way. So that's an example of it.
Chapter 7, Tactics. This chapter by far the longest in the book, and it's really just a list of his like greatest hits. So we're just going to kind of hit you with a couple stories of like tactics, meaning just like, here's what I did in this situation with what I had available to me. And to be honest, this is all Saul really has. He doesn't have like an overarching strategy and a framework. He just like recognizes power levers in the moment and grabs them and just makes decisions.
Yeah.
So
he's like, you have to improvise and blah, blah, you know, but like, why are you writing a book on it? His whole book is basically like, it's like art of war aphorisms. The real action is in the enemy's reaction.
Yes.
All right. Why don't you go use that out in the field?
Yeah, exactly. The enemy properly goaded and guided in his reaction will be your major strength. End quote. You know, another quote like there. So, and dude, he even gives you a nursery rhyme heuristic for imagining new tactics. And he just goes, eyes, ears, nose. If you got lots of people, just parade your numbers around. That's always a good tactic.
That's your eyes for your eye, you know, so people can see it.
Yep. If you don't have lots of people, well, let's get the ears going. Get your people to make a lot of noise and make it seem like you have a lot of people. Bang drums, I don't know, bullhorns, you know, sirens, whatever. And if you don't have a lot of people, you can't make a lot of noise, then why don't you just stink up the whole place? And that's what he would call the nose tactics. Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have, end quote. You know, the threat is more terrifying than the thing itself. Always maintain constant pressure. The one thing certain to get your enemy to react is to laugh at your enemy. This causes irrational anger. So, you know, again, he's just listing ideas that he's had, tactics that he's used. This one is a great story. We're going to jump into the world of Rochester, New York. So Saul Alinsky, his career in the 50s and 60s, he was like a organizing mercenary. So communities that wanted change would call him up and he would fly in and help them get the change that they wanted. So this happened in Rochester, New York, headquarters of the Kodak company, Kodak of Kodak camera, right? Kodak film. In Rochester, Kodak runs the whole town. We need to get the Kodak Corporation to change. How are we going to do this? We're going to hit the Kodak executives where it hurts. They love their Rochester Symphony Orchestra. We're going to get 200 tickets to the Symphony Orchestra Friday night when all the executives are going to be there. We're going to feed 200 of our black friends unlimited baked beans before the show, and we're going to provoke a reaction. And what reaction did they get? He's like, the farts in the were so loud they couldn't hear the orchestra. Dude, that was his method of organizing.
The fart in
the Rochester Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, he's definitely sociopathic. Also sounds like throwing soup at paintings, you know, similar level of crassness.
Yep.
Yeah, the idea of it is worse than the doing of it, you know, in their heads. And I think it's testament too to how just doesn't care about the ethics of any of this. This book is nothing about what actually any of these things accomplished. It's just about how they did what they did. Just like, oh, we stank up this place, we stank up that place. Next story.
Dude, exactly. Yeah. He calls it political jujitsu, using your enemy's movements against themselves. Another one, Chicago department store. They refused to hire black people. He planned an all-day shopping trip for thousands of members of the black churches to the department store's flagship location, downtown Chicago. Buses, shopping lists, flyers posted around town. Just before the shop-in, department store comes to the table with a plan for an influx of new black employees. Another example, Birmingham, Alabama, 1963. Hundreds of black children stayed out of school to join the street demonstrations. And Jay, to your point, he doesn't even say what they're demonstrating for. I mean, maybe if we read the book at the time, we would know, but I don't know this particular demonstration. Birmingham Board of Education threatened to expel any child absent for the protests. Jay, what would Saul say the moment Birmingham Board of says any child not here will be expelled? What would Saul say you should do?
Hell yeah, get your ass expelled.
Get them expelled. We're getting somewhere. We're getting traction. But in this case, the kids did go back to school and the protests lost all momentum. Another point where the
slink out, he would say.
It's a slink out. And he says, we provoked a reaction. Now we have to close make them follow through on their reaction, and that's going to be terrible for them. So that's
nobody's going to want, it's never a good thing when kids are getting expelled from elementary school, the community is going to rebel against any school systems that's expelling little kids. That's why he wanted them to really see it through. You can empathize. He can't empathize with them not wanting to follow through with it, but
this next section, he basically writes a tips manual on how to get thrown in jail. Legitimately, that's what this is. So he goes, if you can get the ruling elite to throw you in jail, it's the best thing for your political career. He goes, now your people, the community you're organizing, they realize, wow, the confrontation goes this deep. This community organizer is so important and he cares so much he's willing to go to jail for us. But don't worry, Jay. Let me tell you how to go to jail properly. First off, make sure it's a short jail term. 1 day to 2 months is about your good window. Too long and the community forgets about you. But he does say, this is a direct quote from the book, a periodic removal from circulation by being jailed is an essential element in the development of a revolutionary.
That's like your resume, all your jail terms.
Exactly. And he goes, hey, by the way, it's a great time to do some self-reflection when you're in jail. So don't waste the time that you're in jail. It's great.
Yeah. That's the only time when you can think about ethics and means and ends, Other than that, you're just in the arena.
Quote, every revolutionary leader of consequence has had to undergo these withdrawals from the arena of action. Another crazy one. Now we got instruction manuals for effective sit-ins. He talks about a Chicago City Hall, real life sit-in. I mean, he talks about, dude, it's hard managing 5,000 people. I mean, this guy is giving you the micro management details, which I do love that.
5,000 people in this sit-in. He's like 1 hour in, people are going to leave to go shopping. 2 hours in, and people are going to get lunch. And pretty soon 5,000's 500, and another couple hours later, it's 50.
So if you're going to do a sit-in, let's organize these buses. 10 a.m.'s a good start time because, you got to give people time to eat breakfast and get dressed. Get people there all in one piece. Once you get the attention of the establishment, give your demands and march out of there with obviously the veiled threat of, we'll be back if you don't listen. Everyone's
got the good vibes from winning and, getting their point across in the demonstration. And then they get to go shopping. And he's like, this demonstrating's fun. You got to make it real fun, quick attention spans for people.
Yeah. And, all tactics have lifespans. So these are just some of the things I've done. You got to do what you got to do in your situation.
Because he even in this interview I just listened to, he describes at a factory that there must have been a lot of sit-ins in this industry or something, and so a factory built a sit-in room with coffee and TV. He's like, that basically just annihilates that strategy. People are going to just sit and eat, drink coffee and watch TV. You're not going to get the point across. You're not interrupting this factory. So what are you going to do? Got to move on to the next thing. That brings us to chapter 8, the genesis of tactic proxy. Is that the chapter title?
Yes, this is the chapter title. And it's a very interesting. So, obviously, at the time, it was his favorite tactic. This tactic has gone by the wayside as far as I can tell. Maybe it hasn't, actually, but
No, it did. It did have a history to it. What a proxy he's referring to, like stock proxies.
correct.
So if you buy enough stocks of an industry or a company, you have voting rights, and you can get you get a voice in the company for how they're running their operations.
He goes in detail on his favorite, this tactic. He in the 1960s, his like big thing he was doing in the late 1960s was getting everyone all across the country buy the stock in these companies and vote this way. And his big vision was, quote, getting 75,000 people to vote one way and then have one person from corporate that represented the majority proxy vote of the shareholders vote another way. And then I dare that company to try and explain themselves when it appears to be a 75,000 to 0 vote, right? That was his latest tactic that he was working on in the 60s, 70s. And so it gets a chapter
I
in this
don't
book.
understand what I thought. He's getting 75,000 to vote one way, and but then how do you get the proxy vote to vote the other way?
Well, he's saying, hey, we're all shareholders. So all 75,000 shareholders are going to vote one way. Well, the shareholders only get a 40% vote. The board of directors gets a 60% vote. So he's saying like, the board votes one way, shareholders vote the other way, the board wins, but he wanted
You have to explain it, yeah.
he wanted the board to have to explain why they disagreed with every single shareholder that they had.
In the 80s, buying stock in certain companies, people got them to divest out of apartheid South Africa. So that's how they had to make companies stop doing business with South Africa. Another one, ExxonMobil acknowledged climate change, like officially from the board because of enough proxy votes. And then the last one, Apple had to improve labor practices at some of their factories because enough people bought stock and made the company act on it. So that's kind of interesting.
And I'm going to go on a limb, and I believe this is happening still today. A lot of what we call it ESG policies. So a lot of these large investment houses have ESG policies, and all the companies they invest in must follow their environmental, social, and governance standards, ESG. And, the right-wing people will tell you, oh, that's all DEI BS, and we don't want to agree with that. But that there is influence coming from these ESG standards that and that's still, so the tactic proxy is still working today in new forms, and a lot of the large investment houses have like rules for how their companies must behave that they use to influence their companies in board meeting votes. Okay, chapter 9, the way ahead. He goes, the white middle class is where the power is in the United States. I mean, this is written in 1970, but add up all the minorities and you don't even get close to middle class white America. 90% of the lives of middle class America is just unfulfilled dreams. He doesn't actually offer
so nuts.
Dude, he doesn't actually offer any thoughts on how to organize a middle class, but just lectures in this chapter on a lot of the key political issues of the day.
I have a great anecdote. This is again from the interview that I just listened to. He's like, you can't organize them the same way. So there's something about GM. I think GM had really polluting engines. This might have been lead. There was a big conspiracy about GM, tricking everyone to thinking lead's not bad because it made their engines run better. Actually, one of the true conspiracies out there that, really sucks. So bad on GM for that. So this is in the 60s. He gets middle-class people to show up to, so he's like, okay, how is GM vulnerable? He's like, in the interview, he's like, I want to get under their fingernails. I want to get in their eyes and ears and, infiltrate them. And he's like, they have dealers. That's how they're vulnerable, through their dealers. You have to buy a GM car through a dealership. So he gets nice, dress up nice, this nice young middle-class families, and then go talk to all of the dealers. They just spend all day going around talking to a dealer. Oh yeah, we're really liking this car. And oh, but you're coming out with those clean engines in about 5 years, right? So these are all the polluting engines. All right, we'll come back in about 5 years.
Wow.
And buy a car, but we're not going to buy a car today. And then they go to the next dealership and do it. And so suddenly, they're not selling cars because the dealers are tied up. The salespeople are tied up with these people all day long. And the salespeople are talking back to headquarters saying, hey, everyone's complaining about this. So I thought that was a pretty cool tactic.
That's a cool tactic, dude. Great story there. That's the Saul methodology. So we're going to finish the book with a review of the prologue, which in our podcast, it's sort of an epilogue, but I put the prologue last because it really is a great summary of everything he's trying to impart to the next generation. This is sort of his gift to the world of like, here's what I've learned, please take it and go along with it. So it is got some good wisdom. It's definitely written as a love letter to the new generation of radicals coming after Saul. He says, what you guys do, next generation, will give meaning to my life's work. Like, the work is not done. Please make my life meaningful. He describes the next generation of radicals coming of age when the book was written. You know, we're living in a world of mass hypocrisy. Young always look for a way to live life with meaning or sense. We're all inundated with a barrage of overwhelming information. We all have an innate desire for meaning. You know, many people can't find this meaning in this out of control society, but they should. Dude, he's like, don't, 1971, don't be a hippie. He's like, some of these hippies, all they do is panic and run, rationalizing that the system's going to collapse anyway, so let's just check out of the system. Some of these hippie guys go for sure loser confrontations so that they can say, oh, at least we tried, we couldn't do it, the man was too strong. Others just get super guilty and they just go crazy.
He describes talking to people who are saying, oh, if this community gets more money and power and stuff, they're just going to turn into the corrupt power and whatever. He's like, so you're going to tell me starving over here, don't eat that guy's pie over there because that's corrupting pie, Why don't you just sit and don't do anything and just because that pie is going to corrupt. He's like, no, we're getting that pie.
Yeah.
We're getting a piece for ourselves.
Speaking to these hippies again, he says, the real radical discovers that if long hair, because you guys know the hippies all had this crazy long hair, if long hair sets up psychological or communication barriers to organizing, you cut your hair. So that's sort of a really good meta point to all these hippies. Like, hey, why don't you cut your hair, look like the people that you're trying to organize, and actually get some organization done and stop just calling them fascist pigs with long hair. Yeah. So,
I love all the fascist pig stuff because it really dates the book perfectly.
It does. It's nice. Yeah, it's a nice date.
It's a good touch.
It's a good touch there. So, and you know what? We're going to close this book out, Jay, with an ode to getting involved from friend of the program, Alex de Tocqueville.
Quote, unless individual citizens were regularly involved in the action of governing themselves, self-government would pass from the scene.
And Alinsky can end it for us, quote, there can be no darker or more devastating tragedy than the death of man's faith in himself and his power to direct his future. I was thinking about this book, Jay, of like, is this just commenting on how politics works? It's just a complete mess and like, why would we even spend? It's just power grabs the whole time. But honestly, it's kind of the way it's supposed to work, right? So it's how, and we're trying to get our readers to kind of see how it really works, and how it doesn't work is in this rose-colored glasses, founding fathers, everyone votes, and it's all hunky-dory way. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. It's a giant battle. And at least let's open our readers' eyes to how politics actually moves and actually changes and actually helps people, and reveal that, take off the shroud of ignorance. Let's go. This is the battle that we're fighting here. And when you watch CNN, when you watch Fox, this is what you're watching. You're not watching facts. You're watching this battle play out on TV for your mind share.
Yeah, the incentive structure is set up for, to be pure, other side 100% bad, our side 100% good. That's the only way to get votes, and that's the name of the game, is getting votes.
If you're the only way to get people to move is we're 100% angels and they're 100% devils, and so everything that you see is target. And this isn't because of social media or cable news, or this is how it's always been. So. Yeah. At least let's acknowledge that that's the way it works, and now we can all make better decisions because we understand it better. I mean, he is basically, his prescription is give your community a story, and the story is we're the Luke Skywalker, we're the rebel force fighting the Darth Vader bad guys. And you know what? We took down one stormtrooper, and then we took down 5 stormtroopers. I mean, everything is framed in this way, and we do one sit-in and we go home and we tell everyone how great of a success it was, and we can't wait to do the next one. We're going to get more people. We have more momentum on our side of the world. So he really is giving, showing these community organizers that you have to write your movie script in, the little versus the big, and we're going to take them down kind of revolution script, right? I think it's a great copy.
Yeah.